Welcome to the Homeschool High School podcast, brought to you by Seven Sisters Homeschool.com and the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. I'm Vicki, and I'm just here by myself today, and I'm going to talk about finding and choosing curriculum because we get questions about that sometimes in our groups, and that's a good thing to know. So first, you have to give me a chance to talk about, being a veteran homeschooler who was around in the hills, So back in the most ancient days, in the early days of homeschooling, curriculum choice was really easy because there wasn't much out there. In those days, early days of homeschooling, you just couldn't get publishers to sell curriculum to you. So there were a few that were bold enough to do that. So Bob Jones University would sell curriculum to homeschoolers. ABECA would sell curriculum. The ACE curriculum would sell to us, but most others would not. And so we started having to create our own curricula. It took a lot of creativity, and we did it. And so out of some of that Seven Sisters Homeschool was birthed because we were teaching our kids, we were teaching co-ops, we started umbrella schools teaching there, and then other people were asking for the things that we developed. So in our areas of interest and expertise, we developed stuff, but so did homeschoolers everywhere. So now there is curriculum galore, and even traditional publishers will sell to homeschoolers. So how do you choose from all the many, many things you can choose from? It's wonderful. So we're going to talk about that today. All right, so let's start out with the basics. One, there's not one right way to homeschool high school. There's not one right way to choose curriculum. So I'm going to give you some ideas that work for a lot of homeschoolers. And if it doesn't work for you, that's okay, because you get to choose curriculum in the way that's right for you. So two, that naturally leads to the idea that if somebody tells you this is the curriculum you'll have to use, then you go like, I don't really think so. Like you can use it if you want, if it's a good fit, if you like it, but you don't have to use anybody's curriculum because they say it's the right curriculum. So even though, Seven Sisters Homeschool sells curriculum, we will never say you must use Seven Sisters, because there's a million different kinds of homeschoolers and homeschool parents and homeschool family needs. And there's a whole bunch of curriculum publishers, and you get to homeschool in the way that's right for you. All right, so then that leads to three. How about some guidelines, though? So when you are ready to find curriculum, to choose the right ones for you, how do you go about doing it? So I'm going to give you some guidelines, and you use the ones that fit for you. All right, so the first thing is if the world will just behave itself, you can find a curriculum that matches your teens' learning styles. So if you've, been homeschooling for a while, or watching your kids learn as they are in regular school and then transitioning to homeschool, you've noticed each probably learns in a combination of ways, but one way may stand out more to you. And if you're really not sure how to do it, to notice, what is standing out for your teens and how they are learning best, I recommend a book called Star Finder by Anita Gibson. So Anita is one of our dear friends, and she wrote this book on kind of observing your kids and your teens, and finding who they are. What's the star? What's the sparkle in them? How do they learn? What are the gifts that God put in them? It's a precious book. So it's called Star Finder by Anita Gibson. All right. With that in mind, then there's four basic learning styles. People will define them in different ways, and teens tend to have a mixture of them, but sometimes one that really stands out. So I'm going to go over those, and you take them for what it's worth. Don't get too stressed about it if you just can't figure it out. All right, but the first one is a visual learner. So these are our teens who need pictures. So they need curriculum that will have photographs, graphs, diagrams, illustrations, links to videos, things like that, because they need to see something with their eyes. That they need some color. It's just the way they work. So I know when my teens were younger back in the days, when I would take a look at a textbook that they could get hold of, like the old math curriculum. Some of them did not have any illustrations in them, the real old ones, and I just couldn't do it because I'm more of a visual learner. But teens who need those things, that is just fine. That is a perfect thing. So that's what we have done in our Seven Sisters curriculum, is we've made sure that there are pictures, and a lot of times at the end of chapters you may have a link to a video or something, because teens who are that kind of a learner will need some of that, and most curriculum has that these days. So usually these visual learners can find what they need in the curriculum that's available. However, if you have several things to choose from, sit down with your teen and say which one feels more like you could actually read through it because it's got enough in there visual for you. Okay, the next kind is an auditory learner. So that's somebody who needs to mostly hear. So they need a class that they are sitting and listening to a teacher, either in person or asynchronous, the self-paced courses, or an online live class, or just, the mom or dad sitting down with the teen and talking through the lesson together. Like, they need to hear things. And that's, some of us learn best that way. And there is nothing wrong with that. It's just a strength. And so if you've got more of an auditory learner, that fortunately there are so many available resources. If parents don't have time to sit down and say, let's talk through every lesson here, to do an online or asynchronous class, or get a class in a co-op, and then they get that auditory component that really helps them learn in their best way. So, shameless self-promotion here. The Seven Sisters is continually adding to our asynchronous, the self-paced classes on the Teachable platform, and the teens have been telling us that they are really enjoying those. All right. Now, the next kind of learner is a reading writing learner, that they are the kind of teen who loves to read and they like to write. They sometimes even like note taking or making outlines, but the reading and writing component does not intimidate them at all. And in fact, they have some real glory in that. So some of my kids, fortunately, for me, were reading, writing teens, so they could sit down with the textbook and get all they needed out of it, and they loved writing their papers, and it was never a fight. So for those kinds of learners, they can use textbooks, or they really blossom, many of them, in real book curriculum. So, learning history using real books, like nonfiction and historical fiction combination kind of things, science from real books. So you can do some real creative things with the reading, writing learners, and having them earn, part of their credits, or leveling up, to honors on their transcripts by writing extra papers. So those reading, writing learners, they can use just about anything. And that's nice when you get one of those. Then there's the kinesthetic learners. And those are the ones who need some kind of hands-on, even at high school level. They are just better if they are interacting in some way. And, most of us do learn better if we're somehow interacting with our material, even if it's nothing more than clicking a link and going and doing something interactive on a website. So one of our best examples of our curriculum that does that is the financial literacy course, that teens have a textbook that they are clicking through on links and doing things like, experimenting with forms and, filling those kind of things out. Because it's interactive and it helps them to learn in a more way that sticks with them. Um, so sometimes teens need, like physical movement. So my friend Angela Shaughnessy, who we interviewed several times about her kinesthetic learners, um, they did a lot of their American history doing reenactments and really got into that, and learned very deeply about the especially in our East Coast area. So there was a Civil War activity and Revolutionary War activity. So they got to learn a lot by movement and being part of something in that way. So, and that's, they earned credits in those areas by logging hours. So I'll put links on how you do that. So, and those teens, sometimes they just got to sit down and work through a textbook, like a math book. And sometimes it's, that you get a chance to do something really creative, especially in science or history. So I'll put links to some curriculum that we have run across that's more of the movement oriented. I know for some kinesthetic learners, they have some learning differences. They have got some really good resources at efmeducation.com. So our friend Dr. Rochelle Somerville Matthews has some really good like consulting that she can do and point you. And she has some classes that she teaches, and that will be more kinesthetic oriented. Okay. All right. So that's visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic. So that you can say VARC to help you remember it. So look in the show notes. We'll put lots of links in there to help you. All right, then in a world that will behave itself, if you can kind of figure out how your teens learn best, if you can find an optimal curriculum for their learning style, then you think about what do you like best? What works for your personality? So like for me, when my teens were in high school, sitting down with them with a subject that we were going to do together, if their textbook didn't have some kind of visuals in it, it was going to make me just unhappy. And so for my sake, there needed to be some kind of illustrations in a text. And these days, fortunately, those are there. So you think, what is best for you? Or if you're a mom that loves adventures, loves field trips, then, maybe some of your courses can be that oriented. Or if you're a family that loves read alouds, and we love read alouds, and my kids, even as adults, if they get together and have some time to spend together, they'll be doing some read alouds still. That we did some of our leveling up in language arts and history and in science with read alouds that we would do together as a family. Never outgrew it. So you think, what's your best learning style? And you keep that in the formula as much as it fits you. All right, does that make sense? Okay. Then you can think about like methods that work best for you. So if you think with the curriculum choices, and we have so many, and again, there's not one right way to homeschool. So you do what's best for you. You can get curriculum that's very highly structured, and then you can get some that is totally unschooled. So you imagine a continuum, like a number line, and it's going both directions. So if you're a really high structured person, you really like things to be laid out for you, and your teens like that too, that's great. And there are really good school at home programs like Keystone or K-12 that your teens can participate in. And it's just like sitting in a classroom. I know the old Becca classes that were online were just filmed classrooms. And, for kids who love that really structured setting, that works well for them. So that's the high end of structured. Then there's just a straight textbook approach, which is fairly structured because you've got to, pick textbooks for each subject and work through those. It helps at high school level to create a syllabus. If you're using Seven Sisters curriculum, a lot of our courses have a free syllabi that you can download and adapt to what you want to do. And so it helps teens stay structured and on task, real clear scheduling of your school year. So you work with your teens on, what you're going to do each semester. If you want some ideas on all the different textbooks to choose from, Look at Kathy Duffy. And I'll put links in the show notes. So Kathy Duffy reviews. She's been around for a long, long time and has extensive reviews on all kinds of homeschool curriculum. So, all right. So that's on the structured end. You've got the school at home kind of approach, or little bit less rigid is the textbook approach. Around similar to that textbook approach in structure is classical education. There's a structure to that. You're doing things in a certain order, using certain books. Classical education is really popular right now, and a lot of co-ops use classical education model. Classical education comes from the concepts of the teachings of the ancient Greek philosophers adapted through the Middle Ages, and there's a rhythm to it. The young people learn Latin and in the grammar, and then they learn speaking, and then they learn logic as they get into high school, and so they're learning thinking and communication skills as they go. But it's very, very formulated. There's a rhythm to it. So if you're in a co-op, they will tell you what classical curriculum they're using. If you're working on your own, there are publishers like Veritas Press and Classical Academic Press, Memoria Press that use the classical approach. So I will put links to those. All right. A little bit less structured than classical education is Charlotte Mason. Don't be overwhelmed by all this. You do not have to get to be an expert in these things. It's just, if it's interesting to you, do some exploring. Charlotte Mason was an English educator in the 1800s, and she educated her community in a reading, narrative, writing, beauty, observation, experiential way. So they'd use real books and real experiences. A lot of writing and communication, a lot of teens who are going to really competitive colleges have done well with Charlotte Mason because there's so much emphasis on communication, narration and writing, observation. If you're interested in that, there's an online school called Dreaming Spires Home Learning. And our friend Kat Patrick, who is from Britain, she has that school, and they work with Charlotte Mason. Also, if you're a Catholic background, Mater Amilabilis, I'll put the link to it because I'm probably not doing the Latin correct. It does Charlotte Mason in an online program. Okay. So then we got very structured. If you go to a moderately structured approach, is a goal-driven homeschooling approach. And that's what we Seven Sisters are. We're kind of stuck in the middle. We don't believe in getting ulcers over anything being too rigid, too overly formatted. But we want to set goals and teach our teens to set goals and work towards those goals. And so we start high school and every year with long-term goals, short-term goals, and how do we choose curriculum that meets each teen's goals for that year, with in mind what they want to have happened to them by the time they graduate and what they want to be prepared for in the long run in life. To us, teaching teens to live with a goal-driven mindset was the goal of high school. And so the curriculum is what builds into that. So I have links in the show notes to our kind of Seven Sisters curriculum philosophy. And then I'll put some links to some other homeschoolers that I know that kind of go in that direction. I know our friend Kareem Morado with her homeschool Spanish curriculum it falls into that goal-oriented view very, very well. Okay. All right. So moving down the continuum. And again, there's not one right way to homeschool. There's relaxed homeschooling or project-based homeschooling. And so that's, what is your teen interested in? Let's not get all stressed about this, and let's explore interest, do projects to learn through the projects, and to build a transcript and credits through the framework of interest. So our friend Teresa Wiedrich who is a homeschooler in Canada, and we just adore her. She has done a lot of project-based homeschooling with her teens who, the ones that are already graduated or in college and finding themselves and doing awesomely, so having a more relaxed, interest-based thing builds a student's self-drive, like they have to do the credits. They got to earn their credits, and how are they going to do that in a way that's interesting to them? So it gives them some, empowerment for when they go off to college or build the next part of their life. They can also do notebooking projects and other hands-on projects. I'll put some links in the show notes, like to our friend Tisha Messing, who she's done a lot of notebooking with her high schoolers. Okay, and then you go down the curriculum type format to the other end, and you run into the unschoolers. And an unschooler is definitely interest led, and so we're not doing school because that takes all the joy out of learning, and you can't learn very well if you hate what you're doing. And so what the unschool philosophy is like what's in your heart to learn about. So it's very interest based, and how do you want to explore and learn about it and really lean into it. And then you out of those interests, you pull the credits. So there's whole ways to do that. I'm going to put links in the show notes with our interviews to Julie Polenko. And then our friend, Teresa Wiedrich has done unschooling also. And she can actually do some coaching with you to help you shift into more of an unschooling mindset and format with your teens if you're interested in that, because every teen is different and there's not one right way to homeschool. All right, so I hope you don't feel too overwhelmed with all this. It's okay. There's not one right way. You will adapt over time. What works one year may not work the next year, and it's okay. You can always change. I'll give you some food for thought questions that may help you decide what you want to do. Okay, so when you're choosing curriculum, and you've got some ideas, you might want to ask yourself, okay, are there things in our lifestyle right now that may affect what we need for curriculum? So if you have a crazy year going on where you're moving or you're caring for someone who is has a chronic illness, or you've got some aging parents, you're going to have to be running around taking them to doctor's appointments. If you've got a new baby or a bunch of toddlers in the house, it may be a year where you need to have a curriculum that's going to allow more independent learning on the part of your teens. So how do you want to do that? Just, hey, we're going to do more online classes, or we're going to do more unschooling this year. And so you make some choices, understanding that your lifestyle matters, and that it, this is what life is, and you can adapt to it. If you have a special needs teen that they have some learning differences or different kinds of physical needs, and so you can build curriculum around that. And I'll put links in the show notes to some creative ways to work with credits for teens who have some learning differences, and also some of my favorite resources for teens that will learn in a different way. And also, you think about your budget. So every year, in my homeschooling days, I would do a dream list just for fun. If I had, endless budget, I would buy this, I'd buy this, I'd buy this, I'd buy this. And then I'd look at my real life budget and tear the other one up. But it was fun to look at it anyway. Like realistically, and when I was raising 5 kids, buying curriculum for 5 kids, like that requires a certain budget. And so we did a lot of developing our own things, not only because there weren't many publishers in that day, but because I wanted my teens to have a certain thing, and I couldn't afford, if that was even around, I couldn't afford it. There is nothing wrong with homeschooling on a strict budget, and you can do that. So also, do you prefer curriculum that has a certain worldview? And that will be, an important thing for families who are in states that reimburse for curriculum purchases. They have a curriculum kind of restriction, like you can't have overt religious teaching. And so we had so many requests from families who are in the states that will reimburse that we have some of our curriculum that's really popular and that have adapted it to fit the criteria for the states that reimburse, because that's just a reality. All right. Now, what you do is you give yourself permission to think about these things, and then take some deep breaths and go watch some funny cat videos. What kind of silly cats or silly animal videos, and do some laughing, and then go back to it before you make some serious decisions. Like, you want to have more fun homeschooling than stress. And, there's no time where you're stuck forever with the curriculum. Even if you buy something and you don't like it, the world is not coming to an end. So, all right. One other thing you can do for finding curriculum is asking your friends and your colleagues, what has worked for them. And you take it with a grain of salt, because everybody's different, but you can get some really good ideas. And so I invite everybody to join Seven Sisters Homeschool Facebook group, because you can throw out ideas. What did you like for this? What did you like for that? And you don't have to just talk about Seven Sisters curriculum. Like, it's a homeschool support group. And so people will share ideas back and forth on things that they like. So please join us there. All right. Well, hopefully this was not too overwhelming, and it was more encouraging than stressful. And please feel free, join the group and ask questions, or send an email to me at Vicki@sevensistershomeschool.com, because I like answering questions. So, all right. God bless you all. We will see you next week. This has been the Homeschool High School Podcast, brought to you by sevensistershomeschool.com and the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. Thank you, Seth Tillman, for editing.